Hi there, my name is Mike Dumka and I'm a digital workplace consultant with Habanero. Today I'm going to be talking about how you can avoid sprawl in Microsoft Teams. So, what is Team sprawl? Anyone who's been in the SharePoint game for a while knows exactly what we mean by sprawl. But for those of you who are new to managing Microsoft Teams, which also includes SharePoint, Team sprawl is where you have an excessive amount of unattended or rarely used teams. This happens when an organization rolls out Microsoft Teams without thinking through the complete team lifecycle. Now, if you've been following in the news, Teams growth is exploding. There is now over 100 million daily active Teams users. That's 100 million of our employees who are creating more and more Teams every day. Someone or something has to clean up all of these teams after our employees are done with them. As someone who's experienced in sprawl warfare, there are a couple of common problems every organization has to solve. The first one is employee self-service. We absolutely want our employees to create their own teams when we need them. We want to support that open collaboration. To do this, we recommend leaving things wide open. But some groups think by limiting who can create teams, you can slow down sprawl. The problem with this approach is you're just delaying the problem, not fixing it. You don't fight sprawl when teams are created, you fight sprawl after the employees are done with the team. Which brings us to problem 2. We want our employees to be accountable for disposing of their teams when they are done. Make no mistake, this is where organizations win or lose the war with sprawl. It's kind of like when we were kids. Our parents would give us toys to play with, but they expected us to clean up after ourselves. Sometimes we would, sometimes we wouldn't. It's the same with teams. We want to let our employees create, collaborate, get their job done, but we want to make them accountable to clean up after themselves once they are finished. Now that we know what we have to do, let's take a look at some of the options that are available to us. The first option is we trust our employees to dispose of their teams once they are finished. If this was in any way possible, you wouldn't be watching this video today. So we're going to strike this one from our list. The second option, we, as in the support team, dispose of the teams once our employees are finished with them. We don't really find this option feasible either. It places too much administrative overhead on our support team. It's also a waste of time and money to have a group like this doing a task that can be automated. So we're going to strike this one from the list as well. This brings us to our third option, and our first viable one. We configure Azure Active Directory to implement a group expiration policy to automate the disposition of teams. The key with this solution is that it supports automation, is provided and supported by Microsoft. Now, while this is a good solution for some organizations, it can't do everything. If your organization has some really gnarly requirements that Microsoft can't support, we have to move on to our last option. This is use a third-party solution to implement an expiration policy, again, to automate the disposition of teams. Some of these third-party solutions are great. They expand on everything that Microsoft is trying to do and more. They can support organizations that have more complex requirements. Now that we have two viable options to help with sprawl, let's take a peek at them. First up, Azure Active Directory and its group expiration policy. Let's take a peek at what it can do. So here we are within Azure Active Directory. As you can see, I've jumped right into the group expiration settings. It's within this screen that the three main options around group expiry can be configured. First, you can set up your group lifetime in days. This is how long your group can live without any activity before it expires. It can be as long as you want, but no shorter than 30 days. Then we have the email contact for groups with no owners. This is usually a monitored administrator email address supporting Microsoft 365. The email contact is in place to ensure someone is monitoring the activity of the group if there is no owner. We need to ensure there is a contact because as groups get close to expiring, owners will get emailed renewal notifications. This happens 30 days prior, 15 days prior, and 1 day prior to the group expiring. If a group no longer has an owner, this email contact will get notified as a backup, not only to make sure that this group stays active, but also to help group members identify a new owner. I am sure you can see why this is important. Then finally, we have the option to turn expiration on or off for Microsoft 365 groups. When on, it can be for all groups or only selected ones. If it's for selected groups, this is a manual process that administrators have to select each group individually. It can't be automated in any way. So as we hop out of our demo, you can see that the group expiration policy within Azure Active Directory has some great benefits. First up, it's out-of-the-box functionality, which means it's provided by and supported by Microsoft. Then, based on our little demo, you can see that it's very easy to configure. Then finally, it supports automation, which reduces administration overhead. In theory, these benefits should be a slam dunk to implement for any organization. But as you dig deeper, it's important to understand that there are some limitations. First up, we can only configure a single expiration policy for all Microsoft 365 workloads that are connected to groups. This means whatever we configure is not only applied to teams, but everything that leverages groups. This could be Exchange, SharePoint, Yammer, Planner, Power BI, and so on. Then there's the fact that the policy can only be configured based on a group's activity. This means that if you have some complex requirements like your group renewal process has to be based on when that group was created, or if you have to have a group expire after a certain duration, like a project that can only last for a year, this functionality is not going to work for you. Also, this may or may not be a big deal, but this functionality requires Azure Active Directory premium licenses. This means depending on what SKU you have for 365, it could be an additional cost. For some organizations, they can work within these limitations, but some can't. They need a little bit more flexibility. And then that's when we have to start looking at third-party solutions. Now, we know that there are a bunch of options out there that can help fight sprawl. Some do a good job of automating, some do a good job of reporting. Some do a little bit of everything. But for us, we really love Apppoint and their cloud governance platform. For those that don't know about Apppoint, Apppoint is part of a very select group of Tier 0 Microsoft partners. This means they get access to new 365 features and functionality before anyone else. This helps ensure that Apppoint products are ready to support their customers on day one when these new features and functionality are released. But when it comes to dealing with sprawl, Apppoint gives us a wide variety of content lifecycle options that just can't be done using Microsoft's out-of-the-box tools. So let's hop in and take a peek at what's possible. So, like with Azure, I'm going to jump right into the group's lifecycle management options for Apppoint. It's important to note though, in context of this conversation, with Azure, you currently only have one option for lifecycle management in your environment. With Apppoint, we can configure as many as we want. With that out of the way, let's take a look at the options we can enable for lifecycle management request types. So as I grab the mouse here, I'm going to scroll down. Here we go. Let's activate the section so you can see it. First up, the deletion of the group or team. This allows the deletion of a group or team when the inactivity threshold is reached or when the lease expiration is up. This means that when your group runs out of time, it's deleted. Then we have the extension of the group or team lease. This allows the extension of a group or team when the inactivity threshold is reached or when the lease expiration is up. Essentially, this allows you to keep your team active. The extension period can be set for as little as 1 day up to several years. Then we have the group or team policy change. When enabled, it allows the site users to change the policy associated with the team or group. An example of a policy change may be to allow or remove guest users. These changes can be supported by approval workflows if your organization requires that. Next is the Microsoft 365 Group Team Site Quota Change. Quite a mouthful. When enabled, it allows you to update the site quota to increase or decrease within a certain storage threshold. Then we have archiving of the team. This option is only available for Microsoft Teams. By default, when a site is archived, all files and conversations associated with that site become read-only, but site owners can still modify the membership. With this option, it allows us to remove all members and/or owners. We can configure new accounts as owners while the site is in an archive state, or we can come up with a combination of those two options to come up with something custom. And then finally, we have the ability to restore an archived team. Again, this is only for Microsoft Teams. It allows us to restore teams once they've been archived. This is something your organization may or may not want depending on the workload. This option, again, can be supported by approval workflows if your organization requires. Now that we have our lifecycle management request types defined, let's move on to defining our inactivity thresholds and our lease management. As I scroll down to our inactivity threshold, get it in view here, make it active. The first thing that you're going to see, or once we get into this, is that it's very similar to what is offered by Microsoft out of the box with Azure Active Directory, but it has a few more bells and whistles. First, we can configure the inactivity threshold to be as little as 1 day up to several years, but then we can configure additional actions or tasks that need to be completed. For example, we can either delete or archive the team after the threshold has been reached. Also, we can back up these actions with the support of approval workflows if you want an additional layer of oversight. Then, if we move down to the group or team lease management, we can see that this is very similar to what is out of the box with Apppoint and the expiration policies. We still have all the same options as I said, and the lease can be as little as 1 day or up to several years. Also, once a lease expires and or is not renewed, Apppoint can automatically delete or archive the team, again with or without approval workflows. The big difference between these two options, right, lease management and inactivity threshold, as we have up here, is one is based on people no longer using it. Lease management is based on a set period of time. So let's move back to our deck to wrap things up. This Apppoint demonstration was for a single lifecycle management policy. Unlike with Azure Active Directory, with Apppoint, you can have as many of these policies as you need to support your governance requirements. Also, everything Apppoint Cloud Governance offers can be used to clean up what you currently have. Sometimes this is called create and chase. You set up your governance policies and then turn them on. Owners get a notification letting them know what policies are being applied to their team or group. They are also informed if their team or group is an active or inactive team or group, or if they have a lease that needs to be renewed. Apppoint will even let owners know if their site's going to be archived or deleted if they're not compliant with current policies. Everything is automated, and the accountability of ownership shifts back to your employees. When it comes to Apppoint Cloud Governance, this is just a small sliver of what the product can do, but you can see why we love them so much. But either way you go, with Azure or Apppoint, there are a couple of points we'd like to leave you with. 1, leave self-service open so every employee can create a Microsoft team when they need it. But also, 2, implement an expiration policy that makes employees accountable for keeping their Microsoft teams active. If they stop using them, they'll automatically be disposed of. And that's it. Thanks for taking this time to listen to me rant and rave about lifecycle management. And if you have any questions, please reach out, and we'd love to talk more about lifecycle management and everything Microsoft 365 governance. Have a great day.